A PI system actually consists of many different subsystems that you can actually inspect if you take a look at the Services applet. I'll go into Administrative Tools here in Control Panel and just launch the Services applet here. So just about all of these services begin with the letters PI. So you'll see a big long list of them sitting in your class documentation. Let's just kind of go over and take a look at some of these just real briefly and what they do. So here are the different services. And individually, these are most of these are subsystems within PI, but there's different types. Some are interfaces, some are major subsystems, some are subsystems that may or may not appear on your local machine. So let's just go through with the laundry list real quick. We have a message subsystem. That message subsystem is responsible for writing messages to the system manager's message log. The license manager, that's what is controlling licenses. So we will take a look, see if they're licensed properly, and send you the right error messages if you're not. You have something called the update manager. This update manager is what facilitates real-time updates to clients. One of the tricks of the trade for making sure we can support hundreds of clients at a time, dozens or hundreds of copies of process book or data link that are all updating in real time. So it's called the update manager. And we're going to look at we'll look at some of these things briefly as we move through the class. The base subsystem maintains the point database. The snapshot subsystem maintains the snapshot data. That's the data that's going to the system in real time, the current data only typically, as compared to the archive subsystem, which manages the archive data, the historical data. Again, all of these are different. You'll find these things listed here. Here's the archive, etc. and snapshot. Now don't worry if the terms snapshot and archive are unfamiliar. We're going to go into those in much more detail when we talk about data compression. And we have a backup subsystem. This PI backup subsystem is what's used for doing automated backups if you choose to do those. We have a shutdown subsystem. Ironically, the shutdown subsystem is something that's typically not going to be running. It only runs when you do a shutdown. It's writing values that say that the system has been shut down to all the tags that have been configured to receive those values. So that's what the shutdown does. It doesn't shut the system down. It writes a shutdown message on shutdown. Now the PI SQL subsystem it's essentially our ODBC OLADB driver for the PI server. So any kind of retrievals that are requesting data using SQL, the structured query language syntax, are going to be handled through the PI SQL subsystem. And then this PI AF link subsystem. See if we can find it in here. Yeah, this link subsystem is what's used for maintaining the connection between the module database, the older asset database, and the new asset database, AF, if you've decided to maintain a synchronization between the two of them. Now, in addition to those subsystems, we also have a number of interfaces. We can see them listed here, but we could also see them listed over here if we go into Program Files and then PyPC. Yeah, there it is. It's under Program Files, PyPC, Interfaces. Now I'm just going to go through this list, and I'm going to ignore some of the extra interfaces that I've installed on this machine that you may not see on your machine. So let's go through the standards. There is a random interface that's used for generating just random numbers and sine wave numbers, etc. for testing purposes. So that can be useful if you're trying to stage a system for testing purposes. This is called the ramp soak simulator. That's used for doing, again, random or normally distributed data, but batch-oriented data. So if you're trying to look at repeated events and you need some kind of a randomizer for that, that's available. Now these last three, Performance Monitor, Ping, and the Snmp Basic, these are basic versions of interfaces that will allow you to go out and grab IT data or IT-oriented data, like, for example, Performance Monitor Basic is going to retrieve the performance metrics that you find in Windows. So if you go into Windows Administrative Tools and you look at performance, see these statistics, let me bring this into the screen here. Yeah, these statistics, like in this case, I think we're just looking at page faults per second and percent of disk processor or percent of processor use. Yeah, well, wouldn't it be nice to be able to bring this into PI? Well, we can through this Performance Monitor Basic interface. And we also have a similar interface for bringing in Snmp data. So Snmp data can be anything from router traffic to whether a printer has toner in it or not. So different devices publish their Snmp data across the web, and we can go out and retrieve that data using this Snmp basic interface. The ping basic is a wonderful little interface that simply sends out a ping request to different computers in your network or in external networks, and then records the latency as it comes back. So it's a great little interface if you want to try to detect where there are network bottlenecks or if there's a network outage of some type. Okay? Now, finally, there are some other types of subsystems that you may not find on all of your systems, but you will find on some. It just depends on how you've decided to license the system. For example, we have the Performance Equation Scheduler, which is a calculation engine. It's kind of a free-form syntax language that you can use to develop expressions to do yield accounting or any type of performance calculations. Okay. Now, don't confuse that with ACE. ACE is our advanced computing engine. That's a separate product that goes a step further than just the simple performance equation. Now, the PI Batch Subsystem, which I believe we have installed on this. Yeah, there we go. The PI Batch Subsystem is for supporting repeated event tracking. We have a whole batch subsystem for looking at repeated events, and this is the mechanism that makes that work. We have this PI Batch Generator interface. For those people that don't have a batch execution system themselves, we can generate batch records, these repeated event records based on just some process value that indicates to us the start and end of a batch. So that's what we use that for. We use that with the batch subsystem. We have a totalizer that is used. A totalizer is really a kind of a misnomer. It, of course, does totalizations, but we only call it the totalizer because that's the most popular type of aggregation. It's more of a post-processor that does a variety of aggregations like averages, standard deviations, mins, maxes, ranges. It can do a whole variety. It's more, you know what it is? It's more fill in the blank than performance equations. Performance equations can do these same calculations, but you have to write that using an expression syntax. With the Totalizer subsystem, you can do this same work, but you simply choose items from a user interface. So that's the Totalizer. The PI Alarm Subsystem is supporting our older alarm package for or not sending, but for detecting when certain process conditions occur and setting alarm tags to certain values to indicate there is some kind of an alarm. And then finally there's the Recalculator, which is typically not running unless you would like to specifically go back and recalculate some of our performance equations, some of the calculations. And why would you want to do that? Well, let's say you've changed some of the inputs, and after those inputs have changed, you need to go back and recalculate the calculations that were based on those inputs. That's what the Recalculator does. Now notice the Recalculator subsystem. It's one of the few PI subsystems that simply is not set to automatic startup, as you can see right here. And that's because it's only to be used typically when you've got some specific need for recalculation.